Adolphus James?
Yes, sir.
I see where you have been charged. 10 shooting with intent, 5 murder charge, 6 grab and flee charge.
But you are not...
Hush up! Guilty or not guilty?
Not guilty, sir.
I don't care what they say, take 400 here, stand down. Emmanuel Zachariah Zakipam,
Yes, sir.
you've been charged. 15 charge of shooting intent, 15 murder charge. And I heard that you was the one down there in Sutton Street who tell the judge, rude boys don't care. Well, this is King Street, and my name is Judge Dredd, and I don't care. Now take 400 years.
Hello and welcome to episode number 17 of the For All That podcast. The second this week. We're very generous to you this week in terms of our podcasting. If you've not seen it yet, you should check out Pat Kane, who was on Wednesday. Today we're joined by Lynda Williamson, who is involved with the Newsnet Scotland website and is SNP leaning but increasingly flirting with the Green Party apparently. Thank you for coming on, Lynda.
A pleasure. Pleased to be here.
Very welcome. And also, as usual, it's me, Andrew Tickell, and we're also joined by Michael Greenwell. Evening, Michael.
Hello. Yeah, I'm still suffering from yesterday, so I apologise in advance for today.
Sprite sounding. And plenty on the go this week, as is with most weeks, it would seem, developments in the political scene. But maybe, Lynda, I just introduced you there in the context of your attitudes towards the sort of political parties. I wonder, why do you sort of move a wee bit recently from being kind of SNP leaning to the Green Party? Could you tell us a wee bit about that?
Through Newsnet Scotland, I've been dealing with the press releases for the Green Party, and so I've been reading a wee bit more about their policies and about their ideas of bringing democracy right down to the people, having local decisions at a local level, and lots of things that they're saying sounds really good to me, makes a lot of sense. They've costed their land value tax idea, which I had never realised before, which again, I think it makes really good sense, and they've done a lot of work on it. They've costed it out and everything. It's not just something they've pulled out of the air. I'm also really, really keen on their idea of having a publicly owned renewables company.
Yeah, and is there, because one of the things I'm often sort of, when I'm talking to my friends in the Greenies, and I actually went to university with lots of kind of folk who were very active in the Green Party, is that it's perceived as often a rather bourgeois outfit. I mean, at the Radical Independence Conference, I think they were described as sort of bourgeois environmentalists by one of the people there. I wonder, do you think that's a problem for them strategically, or that being perceived in that way?
Yes, I think it is, because that's the way I would have perceived them before I started reading up on things. While I say I'm flirting with them, I don't lead a particularly green lifestyle, and that kind of makes me feel a bit guilty about it all, I have to say. I don't ride my bike, I take my car, and so I think, would I really be accepted by the Green Party?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much they have a kind of tyranny of lifestyle in terms of their admission to membership. But I suppose you can always find out. It'll definitely make you declare on the application form.
I'm fat and I drive too much.
So, that's solidarity, sister, in that respect. Michael, what do you think about that? I mean, because you are a non-partisan in your perspectives. I know we all know you're in favour of independence, but does that sort of, do the Greens hold any charms for you, do you think?
Yeah, I do like the idea of bringing democracy back to the local level, and it's something that's been discussed quite a lot. There's a real dearth of local democracy in Scotland in general, and the United Kingdom as well. And their plans to give real teeth to kind of local authorities always strike me as a good idea, something that we should be aiming for. I mean, one of the reasons I support independent Scotland is actually because of this. If you remember the famous line about it's better to have our politicians here in Edinburgh where we can throw stones at them because not even the strongest arm can throw as far as London. I mean,
yes, that's from what Heart of Midlothian, isn't it, by Walter Scott?
Yeah, and that's one of the main reasons I support independence. Actually, I think it's a fairly sound principle to work on, and also a principle that works in moving towards local democracies as well. I agree with Lynda on this.
Yeah, that ties in nicely. Actually, this week, I don't know if either of you saw, but Nicola Sturgeon came out this week in the context of the Constitution, saying that the powers of local government, whatever they might be, will be enshrined and protected as a fundamental part of the basic law of the country. And the argument for this is, I suppose, that you wouldn't get something like the council tax freeze as a policy, that you would have a clear idea about where power lies in different levels, and you would act on that basis, as opposed to using the central government with kind of carrot and stick policies to freeze council tax and all that kind of thing. I don't know if I think that's such a good idea, really. I'm not sure if I think that our basic law should reflect, the sort of potentially movable, mutable, and appropriately so shape of where the power should be in terms of local government or national government. So maybe you'd welcome that, Michael.
Oh yeah, well I thought Patrick Harvey actually was very interesting on, the Independence webcast thing that they do occasionally with BBC. They had Blair Jenkins on it when he's not busy sending pictures of cats to people. And Patrick Harvey was on it the other week, and I thought he was really good with his explanation of that. I don't know if you saw it, Lynda.
No, I didn't catch that. I will have to look at that in the iPlayer.
Okay.
I just thought the Nicola Sturgeon's COSLA speech was really good. A lot of good ideas there and things. I think the relationship between government and between the people should be something that we have defined and protected in our constitution.
One of the questions which always comes to mind to me when we're talking about local government, local, what is what we mean by local? Who is the community, I suppose, is always an interesting question, because it's something which comes up quite a lot when you obviously have planning applications and these kind of ways where people articulate the sort of community through public meetings and whatnot. And actually, the claim is, the hope is that it would be more democratic and people would be able to have a say about things that affect their life. But often, as is often the case in many institutions, I find that you get the kind of noisy voiced representative of the silent majority that take over and then presume to represent the community. And I don't know, I feel a bit less sort of devoutly committed, I suppose, is a basic proposition to the idea that local decision making in inverted commas is always the best way.
No, I mean, I can see the point you're making about there's a problem with certain interest groups could take over, but I assume any major change in the system like this would have to come with, I don't know, a change in education as well, so that people are well aware of the new system that's in place. I understand it could be exploited in the short term by some people, but if people had been educated and became used to this system, wouldn't it become fairer? Wouldn't that in some way ameliorate the risk of that?
I was hoping it would bring a change in attitudes, drive a change of attitudes to people who are disengaged in politics now. And people don't bother because they feel that it's not going to make any difference. Whereas I hoped if you brought it further down to people, they would be more engaged and you would drive a kind of change of attitude in people. But Andrew's point about you do get the occasional folk who are louder than anybody else who might take over does worry me.
Yeah, it's just something I wonder about. I think though, Michael, I mean, to be less cynical about it, I think you must be right that people are created with particular political attitudes and ideas about what kind of power they can exercise in society. And we create that. That's not inevitable. It's not inevitable that we have the system now and the civil disengagement and the lack of kind of active citizenship. I don't think we should accept that as an inevitable feature, and I suppose actually I'm being a bit pessimistic, and that maybe if we were going to transform things, then actually a sense of empowering folk collectively and individually more to make choices about their life would be a very good start to doing that, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's the point. I think Linda's right. It's that people don't engage, or many people don't engage simply because they feel it doesn't make a difference. And actually, as things stand now, I'm being the pessimist, but actually, as things stand at the moment, they're probably right to think that. In a lot of ways, it doesn't make much of a difference getting involved at the local level because everything's too centralised.
Yeah, and that's maybe we can just move on actually on the constitutional theme to a different angle on that. Michael, you were, as ever, devotedly reading your Scotsman this week, I assume, and came across another intervention by the leader of the Better Together campaign, Alistair Darling. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, well, everybody's darling's at it again. I mean, he said, okay, I'm going to quote him. He said, "I'm innately suspicious of written constitutions. A written constitution without the resources to back it up is hot air." We need to get on to a discussion about why would he be suspicious of written constitutions? Now, I suppose one of the things you'd think would be he believes it limits the powers of the state, and the state needs to be able to be flexible in times of crisis and so on. That could be the positive argument. The negative one could be that as a former member of New Labour, they didn't want to be bound by anything, so they could get away with things like rendition. And I mean, you can say that in the current constitutional settlement of the United Kingdom, they are in certain sense bound by the rule of law, but they can also make a law to say that they're not bound by the rule of law as well. This is the flexibility that he sort of talks about. And I put on my blog this week just as a kind of joke, a picture of him with various world leaders going, I wonder if he brought up his concerns to these people. Should they rip up their constitutions? And it's either staggering hypocrisy, or it's basically him crying out for the unlimited power of the state. I don't know what you thought of it, Andrew.
Well, I wonder if this is potentially a feature of his intellectual biography, because Alistair Darling was a lawyer, was an advocate before he became a Labour politician, and he would have been brought up in the context of an idea of public law, of constitutional law in the UK, which is very much about what's Dicey and sovereignty. And Dicey was a legal scholar that articulated this idea of the sovereignty of Parliament being absolutely fundamental. And I actually got that education similarly at Edinburgh Law School in the 2000s. I think it's changing a wee bit now, and people are getting a bit more of a nuanced perspective on bills of rights and international rights and constitutional rights. But I would guess that maybe his suspicion is partly down to kind of being indoctrinated in that kind of British, in inverted commas, constitutional tradition. What really confused me, though, about his remark is that if it's not properly resourced, it's hot air. Now, I mean, what does that actually mean in practice? That because people, if you challenge things under other constitutions in other countries, it's individuals taking litigation in court, it's officers of the state observing the constitution through their lawmaking activity and all that. So it seems, I don't know, I mean, he may be making a reference to an idea that if you have a really long constitution which enshrines lots of stuff, justice, truth, social rights to education, blah, 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 that actually, if you don't pay for it, then that is just hot air. Maybe that is what he's saying. I don't know, Lynda, what did you make of this?
I was completely baffled by the statement. It seemed to me quite ludicrous that he would come out with this. I mean, we're only 3 countries in the world who don't have a written constitution, and yet he's trying to argue that every other country in the world has got it wrong. I find it a baffling statement. I'm interested to see how this will pan out, whether this is going to be a new feature of how he's maybe going to try and attack the Yes movement with their idea of a constitution.
Because it's funny, I think it's quite a kind of sociologically interesting thing that it's kind of taken for granted among Scottish nationalists and just pro-independence folk, I should say, in general, that an independent Scotland would have a kind of written constitution, an enumerated Bill of Rights, because actually there's no reason why we first off should do, but it does, I think, reflect this idea that we're going to become a proper nation, and a proper nations, in line with what you were saying there, Lynda, have constitutions written down. I think there is actually lots of interesting questions around this topic about well, do we want to have these rights fundamentally protected? There has to be obviously some legal basis for government, but is it always a good thing to have rights? Do rights enshrined in law, fundamental rights, really help people all that much?
I suppose that depends on the constitution that we write. It depends on how good the constitution we come up with is. And I think that we're in quite a good position that we can look around. It's not like we have to start it from scratch. There are lots of people out there who have quite good constitutions that we can look at and cherry pick little bits and come up with something that's really good. So I think it depends on the actual constitution that we end up with, whether we end a really good one.
Yeah, do you have any, you were saying kind of cherry picking there, I wonder, do you have any personally ideas, specifically things that you think it would be important to see in that constitution if we become independent in 2014?
I think very much just about the nature of government and government's relationship with the people and their relationship with business. And I think these have to be defined in law and protected so that government works for the people and doesn't work for big businesses and end up with the inequality that we have in the UK at the moment.
No, well, and specifically, if you could just unpack that bit about business, what kind of thing would you maybe have in mind about that?
Well, about the power of whips and the power of levy from big business over government. Like, when you look at